Good morning, and or is it still morning? Yeah, good morning and welcome to our Community and Health Services Committee meeting for February the 6th. Today we'll be discussing the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Directed Growth Plan, and specifically the development of community-based nonprofit childcare spaces. We also will be considering a committee member's motion on the implementation of the interim housing plan. I'll now call on Julie Hale to conduct the roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig. Present. Councillor Deutschmann. Present. Chair Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton. Present. Councillor Harris. Present. Councillor Hunick.
Happy Community Day.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Burbanovich. Councillor Williams.
Present.
And Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you. As we begin this meeting, we are again reminded that many of our homes and places of employment in Waterloo region are situated on the land, the land that is the traditional territory of Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Shinoleton peoples. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historical connection to Waterloo region, and we also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here and reaffirm our collective commitment to keep the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real and intentional in our community. Are there any pecuniary interest or declarations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing there are none. We have no delegations.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, I do have a conflict of interest with respect to the any discussion on daycare, as my spouse has an interest in a property that currently has a tenant that is a daycare operation. So I will not be participating.
Okay. Thank you. Noted by clerks. No delegations. We're on to number 5, the consent agenda. If you wish to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we'll not take any questions on consent items unless items are requested to be removed to the regular agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda will be dealt with in one motion. Are there any items you wish to have removed from the consent agenda and dealt with separately? Do we have a mover and a seconder then for the consent report listed on the agenda under item moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Wolf? Would you please use your e-scribe icons to vote? That is carried. On then to our regular agenda, item number 6, the equitable services and opportunities, increasing space opportunities for community-based nonprofit childcare. And Barb Cardot, the Director of Children's Services, is to will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for having me say a few words before this report. I have been in front of you a few times over the last year or two about the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Plan, and to give you a little bit of background before I proceed with the recommendations that we're making, I just want to remind you that the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Program is that program that is most broadly known as $10 a day childcare. We're not there yet. Parents are paying it about half of what they paid in March of 2021, or 2022, excuse me. But we are moving toward parents only having to pay $10 a day in 2026. The Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Plan is also working on increasing childcare spaces, as I know all of you know that there's a shortage of childcare, not just in Waterloo Region, but across Ontario and across Canada. Another focus of the plan is ensuring that all children have access to equitable childcare, including children who have historically experienced barriers in accessing childcare. And finally, the focus is also on the workforce and increasing our childcare workforce and the remuneration of childcare, early childhood educators, and the working conditions. So in Waterloo Region, we have a space target of 3,725 new spaces between 2022 and 2026. I'm really happy to report that 921 of those spaces have been created between 2022 and 2023. We have 1,400 more spaces that are planned to be opened between 2024 and 2026, and that leaves us with a remaining 1,404 spaces to reach our service targets. And I should note that those service targets come with the funding that we need to provide operating funding to the childcare operators, as well as some capital funding and startup funding to support the creation of these new spaces. I also want to remind you that we have a target for ratios of nonprofit to for-profit childcare programs. Our ratios in Waterloo Region are 85% nonprofit to 15% for-profit spaces. Currently, in our centers for children 0 to 4, we're sitting at about 60% nonprofit, 40% for-profit. So we need to focus on increasing the nonprofit growth in Waterloo Region. We have been working with our nonprofit operators, who I have to say have been enthusiastically participating and are very interested in increasing spaces so that children across Waterloo Region can access high-quality licensed childcare. They are, however, indicating that there are some barriers to creating new spaces. And it seems that besides the workforce, a significant barrier is accessing land, affordable, appropriate land or buildings that are suitable for licensed childcare. And so that has brought me to my recommendation today, which is we're asking council to direct staff to explore, where feasible and appropriate, the development of community-based nonprofit childcare spaces. So these would be spaces run by childcare operators from the community in regionally owned land, buildings, and surplus lands. They might also occur in housing developments, Waterloo Region housing developments, and any other emerging opportunities. My second recommendation is that that council direct Children's Services and Housing Services and Economic Development to work with area municipalities, school boards, universities, colleges, hospitals, and any other partners and businesses to explore creating affordable spaces for community-based nonprofit childcare in underutilized building and lands. So that brings me to the end of my introduction, and I am here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Barb. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, and thank you very much for bringing forward this recommendation. I think it's great to look at surplus lands and really look at focusing how we can bring forward these childcare spaces. I was just curious in the report, I know a few times you'd mentioned that the evaluation for these spaces will be aligned on priority geographic locations. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on what those locations are, how they're prioritized, and if there is a rural element considered as well.
There is. So thank you for the question. And we brought a report forward, I believe it was last April, and it is on available on the website. And there's a map on the website that shows the priority areas. And I can say that the rural areas are definitely part of the priority areas. They were all identified using a process of identifying children who, communities that have a lot of children, where there's a lot of, where perhaps socioeconomic status is lower, and presence of other risk indicators too, and lack of childcare spaces in those communities that have been identified as ideal locations for licensed childcare.
So it is the map that we got last year?
It
that
is,
those are
yeah,
okay.
that map is our guideline.
Okay.
I do want to say that that map is an excellent starting point, but sometimes there is a really good argument if there is something that is perhaps just outside of one of those areas that serves a specific population that is currently underserved, that might be an exception to using the map. But for the most part, it's our guideline.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Barb for working with our staff. That we have a new facility that I think is opening before April, June.
Wonderful. I knew June, but that's wonderful
June,
to hear.
okay.
Yes, yeah.
So that's really good. My question, I'm not sure if it's for you or for Mr. Sweeney, and it's kind of general. As we talk about supporting people who are precariously housed, how do we work with them for childcare? Because if you look at upstream sorts of solutions, childcare is certainly one of them. Either.
Yes. So, great question. We are working with our colleagues over in housing and this is partly why we are really wanting to ensure that we are locating childcare in communities where there is a higher level of poverty or where there is existence of supportive housing or affordable housing. We also are working with agencies and organizations across the community who may otherwise be working with populations that are more likely to be precariously housed, to work together with them to find solutions for childcare for them as well. I'm sorry I can't say anything more specific, but I can tell you that those conversations are well underway. Thanks.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report and the presentation. I strongly support what you're doing. What is the wait list right now for childcare?
Yeah, so the wait list has increased to 9,200 children. It has increased by 115% since the announcement of the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Plan. There has always been a shortage of childcare. However, many people did not even consider licensed childcare because either they couldn't, well, in most cases, they just felt they couldn't afford it. Now that it's more affordable, that has increased the demand. And of course, there's more awareness of licensed childcare, which has resulted in significant increase in demand.
Okay, thank you. I can see that, well, I guess on our last session, we made a motion to look at all regional land, et cetera, through a housing lens. And now I can also see that we need to also include the childcare lens, looking at all our buildings and structures. Now, the region doesn't or no longer provides childcare directly, is that?
Yes, we no longer directly offer center-based childcare, but we do provide licensed home childcare. And through our licensed home childcare, so we don't provide the home childcare. We contract with approximately 350 childcare caregivers who are providing childcare in the community. They're supported by our program and by the early childhood education consultants who work for our program to meet the needs. I think we have about 1,900 children right now receiving home childcare in this community through the region of Waterloo.
Okay, thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunek.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Barb.
Hi.
Thank you for this excellent report. I was saddened to learn that there's 9,000 plus children in our region waiting for supports and services. I was very inspired to learn about all the different locations and programs you're looking into to fill that need. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, echoing what others said, thanks for all the work that you and your staff team are doing on this. I'm just curious about the percentage and the breakdown around private and nonprofit, and why that is. Like, with what you described as the home care piece, are those not considered private operators? I'm just confused, like,
Sure.
what, like, because why the private, like privately run daycares or child cares, as long as they're like licensed and are, meeting all the criteria, why they wouldn't be supported through this as well? If you could explain that, that would be helpful.
So all operators who currently exist in Waterloo Region who want to be part of the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Program are. So we opened up that program to anybody who wanted to participate. That does include our home child care caregivers, and that does include for-profit and private child care operators who were currently in existence. As we talk about growth, we are prioritizing nonprofit growth to help us to get to our ratios of 85-15.
So thanks for that clarification. So why nonprofit versus private in terms of meeting the growth? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so the federal government, when they announced the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Program, they did indicate that all growth would occur in the nonprofit sector. And that was because through the research that they were referring to, that nonprofit care was more likely to be able to deliver on meeting the universal needs of childcare across the community, and be more sustainable and better positioned to be able to provide the highest quality care.
Any other questions? So we need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor Hune. Are there other questions? No. Okay.
Councillor McCabe asked my question.
Thank you for your presentation and the work that you're doing. I know with the seawell, it's just created a whole new realm of work for your department, and you're doing a great job. And I just remind Council, looking at recommendation number 1, where we're talking about childcare spaces in regionally owned lands and buildings, I think that was part of the RFP that we issued last week for that building on Highland Road for affordable housing, where we were going to ask the potential developer to try and incorporate childcare spaces into that property. So we are working at trying to develop that. Yeah. Could you please use your e-scribe buttons to vote on the recommendation?
This side moved it when you guys were talking.
Yeah. The one side was not paying attention when we moved it. That's carried. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. On to item number 7.1. We have received a notice of motion which has been moved by Councillor Harris. Before Councillor Harris speaks to that, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor McCabe. Councillor Harris, you...
Chair, point of order.
Yes.
I just want to raise a point of order with respect to this motion from Councillor Harris. The motion, as it reads, should be described as an attempt as a motion of reconsideration. And as such, because it's basically reconsidering a motion that was passed during budget and which was then affirmed by bylaw. So it's a commitment of council to make this payment to this group. This motion is attempting to alter the elements of that previous motion. And as Councillor Harris voted in the minority with respect to that original motion, he's not in a position to bring this motion forward to reconsider the payment of those funds that were approved by council previously. And so therefore, this motion shouldn't be heard.
So I just became aware that you might be raising this and on advice from clerks, and I'll let them speak more in detail if you wish. The motion was passed at the final budget on December the 13th, was to provide funding for a better tent city in 24. And Councillor Harris's motion does not affect the funding at all, but is rather focused on
specifically,
metrics and a reconsideration.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but it specifically says no funding to be made until certain aspects are changed per this motion. So it's affecting the funding.
Do you want to?
So it is staff's belief that the motion is for metrics and it's not actually changing the funding. So we do not believe that it's reconsideration in this case.
Well, okay. I'm interested in the chair's ruling then with respect to what I've brought forward.
I will accept the clerk's interpretation.
The clerk's interpretation, I mean, leaves me in a position of having to challenge the chair. I mean, this is clearly an attempt to halt payment based on certain parameters. It's saying no payment is made until there's an agreement with respect to metrics. Well, it's plain speaking.
Councillor Harris?
Yeah, I get Councillor Deutschman's, comments on this, and I mean, I guess speaking to the motion, I mean, I'm happy to remove prior to the distribution of funding. I think for the sake of the committee's time here to just simply move forward with that, I can introduce the motion that I'm going to, as you've seen in your package, with the deletion of the prior to distribution of funding, because I believe that that'll be imminent. So, maybe I'll speak to the quick. Basically, we all know the circumstance behind, this request that came to council during the budget process. Obviously, this funding, this group applied through the normal channels, and was declined based on the criteria by staff for that funding envelope. They then came to council on a one-off. Council approved in the budget the sum of money to the organization, and I'm simply asking council to apply, the same elements of accountability that we would, place with those groups that would be granted, similar funding mechanisms through that normal process, knowing that, as future groups, may be declined for other reasons, that they choose to then come to council during budget time. And receive funds, that they too will be asked to provide staff with, elements to ensure transparency for taxpayer dollars here. I do believe as well that we had, there was a request for a second year to be included. Council, chose to give them a 1 year, grant, and that there would be some valuable outcomes and data that we can ask staff to collect from that organization that will likely help council's decision to extend this particular agreement. And so that's just really what I'm asking for here. So happy to drop the prior to the distribution of funding. I'm not sure if in fact the funds have made its way already, but I believe staff should be afforded the same opportunity to work with these groups to collect this information to ensure some transparency and accountability for funds that we arbitrarily gave this group, and this should apply to other groups that take a similar path. So I'll leave it at that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. First of all, the funding is for 2024 and 2025. That's clear in the motion. I have a copy of the motion here in front of me from the clerk. And second, I kind of am a bit concerned about the use of the term arbitrary with respect to the decision of council, we had a very fulsome debate, and when you look at the original motion, all of those issues that Councillor Harris is talking about were considered in the whereases. It's a very detailed motion that outlines a full understanding of what Better Tent City is and what they do and how they operate and what benefit they provide to our community. So that was all fully discussed. And the motion was passed 10-5 or something like that, I believe. So there's nothing arbitrary about the decision that was made. And second, it's a 2-year funding commitment. Now, if Councillor Harris wants to bring a motion that takes out the part about payment and wants to talk about discussion about accountability and some parameters being added, can have that conversation. That's fair. But we cannot now say, after approving the funding, that we're not giving you the funding unless you agree to certain terms at this point. That is inappropriate.
Okay. Somebody said this was going to be a short meeting. Yeah, so my question was going to be, are you prepared to amend your motion, Councillor Harris?
Yeah, I said I would remove the prior to distribution of funding, so you can basically a Better Tent City that align with existing homelessness outreach agreements and providers, and that such are agreed to with a Better Tent City. And then drop the prior to distribution of funding.
Okay. Okay, so that's, and I think clerks can make that change on the screen. Councillor Vandenbeck.
Well, thank you very much. And I share some of the concerns that Councillor Deutschmann has raised from a procedural point of view on this issue. But further to those, I really have two questions. And I realized there was a lot going on that day, and Chair Harris did a wonderful job of trying to chair a very complex meeting. But as I recall, and perhaps staff can indicate if, or Councillor Harris can indicate if they've actually gone back and listened to the video, because there was direction at the end of that vote to staff to make sure that they put an agreement in place as part of that with staff. So that may not have formally worked its way into the motion, but that direction was given in the meeting. And so I'm wondering if anybody can comment on that.
Through you, Chair, I will confess I don't recall that part from that very long day. I do recall some commentary around ensuring there's some paper to be applied to this funding, which I will confess I took as more of a procedural accounting element as opposed to any sort of documentation in terms of outcomes to that funding. Is my recollection, Councillor Vandenbeck, rightly or wrongly?
Yeah, so I think it may be helpful to do that. But my second question is, and I guess this question goes to Councillor Harris and or to clerks, has we're dealing with an organization where we've already made a decision on a motion. I respect the fact that some people don't agree with that decision, but in democracy, that's the process that's followed. And so has anybody given the organization a heads up that this motion was on the agenda today?
Yeah, I guess I would, a vote is a vote, and we now stand as a council with the decision that we have, and I am perfectly fine with that decision. I have not, had any discussion with any other particular group, especially at Better Tent City, about this. I think, this is an approach that I believe, it should be applied to all groups that come to council outside of the normal, application process for funding, and that's why, in my motion, the main point here is again to collect outcomes, data, and metrics, to be able to have that information. I know we're going to have another robust conversation about the plan to end chronic homelessness. I know our colleagues from all corners of the region have talked about, the metrics and the data that help inform these decisions. We ask for regular updates from staff on all kinds of things, and I just want them to ensure that this group that's received funding has provided that information to allow us to make the good decisions that we frankly do. So that's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking to reverse the decision in funding. That's been made. We've committed to that. It's just simply providing the information that I think we'll be able to use in the future as we deal with this, a significant problem here in our community.
So I will go back and ask my question again, and I think I got to go and practice my command of the English language. Has anybody bothered to inform the group in question that an item is on the agenda today concerning their grant? And I'm wondering, okay, if staff and clerks can say if they did, and if Councillor Harris can. Has anyone informed a Better Tent City?
Well, I have not, because I'm making this motion on behalf of the taxpayers that are investing the money in through their organizations. So,
Okay.
If this motion
just looking
fails,
for a yes or no, Councillor Harris.
if this motion fails,
Okay.
then we don't need to contact them. If it passes, then I'm assuming staff will reach out to say,
That's not the point. They should have a voice.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the debate amongst council is helpful. Mr.
Okay,
Sweeney?
can I get
No, okay.
staffers saying no as well?
Through you, Chair. We have had no staff conversation with an organization about a motion that has yet to be debated at council. That would not be something we would normally do.
So, but do we not normally with community partners, when we have issues on an agenda, let partners know that that item's on the agenda so that they're not surprised, like that they can delegate and all those kinds of things? Or do we expect that everyone's regularly, anxiously reading the agenda as we do to find out what's on it?
So again, Councillor Rabanovich, I don't make it a matter of our personal work to review agendas and inform the community of what's on a council agenda. That's not something that we practice. And again, in this case, that would not be appropriate for us to presuppose a debate in council in terms of what's going to happen here today.
So in that regard, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a deferral so that the organization can be informed that the item's on the agenda and they have the opportunity to delegate should they choose to do that. I think that's only appropriate. And deferral to council day.
Pardon? So is there a seconder for the deferral? Councillor Deutschmann. So just procedurally, there's no debate on the deferral, but can we go ahead and take the other people that are listed to speak? No?
I can hold my deferral motion if you want until you have the opportunity for others to speak.
In fairness, there are 5 other people that would like to speak.
I'm willing to wait.
Okay. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair Erb. The resistance to accountability in this instance is making me really nervous. And in terms of informing a Better Tent City, they could have read the agenda, or Councillor Romanovic could have informed them. If there's not already a policy that says whether you receive funding from the region as a museum, as a child care center, as a homeless shelter, or whatever the case may be, I think there should be. And if this motion by Councillor Harris doesn't pass, I'll be bringing one in the near future. Thanks.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Erb. Just a couple of questions, just for clarification. Commissioner Sweeney, can you speak to some of the outcomes that you may collect from other agencies and the types of data and or metrics? Because I think there needs to be some clarification in terms of what outcomes would look like based on this service provider.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor James. I'm going to defer to, looks like Kellyanne. Come on down.
Come on down.
She'll give you a better answer than I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor James, for the question, and through the chair. So a couple of the pieces of the data and the metrics that we would have gathered from any other providers in the system delivering services and supports would be the number of referrals and services that the unique individuals have been referred to through a Better Tent City, how many unique households or individuals that we would serve necessarily. So that's some of the data that we would normally ask our providers to give to us. And then a bit of a narrative, like at the year-end summary, like to identify to us, like, what are some of the gaps in the system that they're seeing based on the referrals that they're making, talking to the participants and the residents, so some of that.
So just to confirm, is the data collected then like a year-end summary, or is
Yep.
it maybe quarterly?
Yep.
Okay.
Service restrictions as well. That's the data that we are asking for from other providers providing outreach services and supports.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I can support the recommendation to ask for outcomes and data. I think that's a perfectly reasonable request for someone who we are funding. But I also want to note that A Better Tent City is a grassroots organization that saw a need and found a solution, and it's a model that we've actually incorporated and followed at Herb Street. And so while we set out accountability and we set out metrics for distribution of funds, I think it's always council's prerogative to look at how those funds are distributed in the end. And so I know it's been a kind of a difficult day where we're looking at things outside of the budget, and we do need to look at that in the whole context. But this particular motion I support. I don't think we can go wrong with getting information.
Councillor Williams.
Well, thank you, through your chair. Just a couple quick comments. I agree with Councillor Harris. I think that this is part of the bigger conversation that we've been talking about since the last meeting about our external funding and granting. To me, it's a reasonable request of the organization because generally, even when we fund any small organizations, there are generally requirements to provide certain information. And I think that would keep things equitable amongst all recipients in any category. I agree that having those metrics could also affect our decision if they request to extend the funding in the future, which is a distinct possibility. And I think it would make our decision-making more clear, having that information for the next 2 years going forward in case they do request an extension. So I think that this would be an appropriate ask of the organization, and I would support his motion.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that I just want to reflect on the fact that I'm not sure if this is quite the correct issue. We're looking at improving the situation with the metrics, et cetera, through this motion. But I think the real issue is what is the criteria or the litmus test that we're applying to groups, and why didn't A Better Tent City pass that? And I think that's the real issue. I'd like to know that at some future date, exactly why Better Tent City was originally turned down.
Okay, Councillor Vanovic, and then I think what we're going to do is deal with the motion of deferral after the speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, in light of the changed motion, I have no concerns around them reporting the kind of information that Mr. Sweeney indicated. I think that's only prudent, and knowing the people on the board of that organization, I would fully expect that they would welcome that opportunity as part of the process in an interest of transparency and accountability. I will say, that's not the way it came across initially as a motion, and thank you to Councillor Deutschmann for identifying those issues because it would have made it contrary to the direction as approved by this council. But the second point is I still believe that fundamentally, if there's a motion coming onto the floor impacting an organization, we deal with community partners all the time. And, if you look at most reports, it says staff have engaged and consulted with blank, da-da-da-da-da-da. If a motion like this is coming forward, I would think that it's only appropriate if we want to be effective community engagers which we always say that we are as we build this world-class region, then I think it means letting people know so that at least they can either choose to delegate or not. And so based on that, I will move a motion to defer to council. It would have to come back at council anyway, so they have the opportunity to add their voice to this. It's part of democracy, quite frankly.
Thank you. So it's been moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, but I don't have a seconder for the deferral. Okay, seconded by Councillor Deutschman. All right, your e-scribe voting function will appear on the deferral. Sorry? Sorry, yeah, that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo defer the motion discussed under item 7.1 to February the 21st, 2024.
Is that the amended motion or the one that currently exists?
The amended motion.
The amended motion?
The amended,
okay, thank you.
So the deferral is passed. Wait, yeah. Okay, so the deferral is approved. On the item number 8, Council Committee tracking list, Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a comment from our last debate discussion we just had, and it was with respect to what Councillor Craig had brought up, and I've brought this up previously too. It's about the metrics and a review of the metrics and for like fee for service and those sorts of things. And I know I've brought it up in the past about having an opportunity as council to review that, and I'm not sure if that's something that would be added to the council committee tracking sheet, so that we're aware of at some point that this matter would come back to us to review these metrics, because we did have some questions, and this is a newer process for us, and I think it's fair to take a look at the outcomes of the process and discuss ways that we may want to amend those metrics going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Deutschman. I do recall that conversation. From staff perspective, I would appreciate formal direction from council for us to come back prior to going back out to the community with the fee for service.
Okay.
So if that's the will of council, that would be helpful to get that direction to be able, before we go down another path.
Okay, I'll follow up and then bring something forward at a future date. I have a second item. It might be under other business or here, but it's with respect to the Schwab and King Street shelter. I believe that lease on that property is coming up in the summer, and I'm not aware of any steps that we are taking with respect to dealing with that facility post that lease.
Again, through you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. The current lease wraps up this summer. We are well into a process of evaluating the next thing that must happen, and I hope to come back to council likely around the same time as the plan to end chronic homelessness. So we've earmarked internally and with our partners to have some further clarification about what's next by the end of March. So we would come back to council in April.
Okay, I won't bother asking for the tracking list then, since you've given a date.
It's high on our radar. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from tracking, council tracking? Is there any other business? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Craig.
Just to follow up on my friend's commentary about Schwab and Club, one of the issues we had with 150 Main, and we know is happening around the Schwab and Club, is the community unrest about concerns that are how the community is affected by these different groups. So is there any way we can get further information, either from our staff or policing, to give us a better understanding of the impact of these particular facilities on neighboring communities?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Craig. The first thing we can do is put together a summary of some of the engagement we've had with the neighbors. This is the primary responsibility of our operator, in this case, the working center, but of course we work hand in hand. Yes, we can do that. Okay. The second piece is just as a reminder when we're going back to the direction that we received from council. There were a number of recommendations in the interim plan to end chronic homelessness, and one of them was around this exact challenge of the opening and closing of shelters in neighborhoods all throughout Waterloo region, and the need for staff and the direction for staff to look at alternatives that might be more long-term in nature, so that we can avoid some of this up and down, back and forth on this one. So yeah, we'll bring back a summary either by email or to the next committee. Okay.
Anything else under other business? Oh, sorry, Councillor Vranek.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just as one quick follow-up, Mr. Sweeney, you indicated that the issue of Schwab will come back probably March and then the other report in April. I presume both of those will engage in, prior to it coming back, in some level of dialogue, like meaningful dialogue with the area municipalities around that, because obviously, you know, we end up being impacted in a significant way.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Last call. Our next Community and Health Services Committee meeting is on March the 24th. I now need a motion to go into close. Moved by Councillor Ravanovic, second by Councillor Nowak. Your e-scribe buttons to please vote. That is carried. Lunch is served.